Amir Khan and Kell Brook, where the hell do I begin with this one? So this is a fight that has been really brewing for about, I don't even, 10 years? Maybe even more if you really know the history between the two of them that goes back all the way to when they were sparring with each other, to when they were just coming up as amateurs. There is so much history between the two of them, and I kind of did this video because I think the history behind them, they obviously are now scheduled to fight February the 19th, and I won't believe that this fight's going to happen until they're locked in the ring with each other, because I still have doubts. But they are scheduled to fight. It's been a long time coming. Should have happened sooner, but it is here, and there is still some hype behind this fight, despite what people say. So I want to go through the history of their rivalry, because it's almost been like, I don't want to say it's been British boxing sort of what if, but it has been a fight that has really, like, when people talk about Khan and Brook, they almost talk about them with a bit of annoyance rather than, a sort of, I don't know, like you see some fights like when people talk about fantasy matchups, like when people talked about maybe a Riddick Bowen and a Lennox Lewis, or if they go full on fantasy and talk about a Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali. We may never see the Joshua Fury fight. We never got, I hope we get it, but we may never see the Joshua Wilder fight. I pray that we get to see a Spencer Crawford fight, but that might be on that. But it's not the same as this fight. Those fights maybe were much bigger than this one, but this fight, there was a domestic and competitive edge to it, which I think wasn't the case with all of these other ones. And so yeah, I want to kind of go through a history of what happened with Khan and Brook, because it's quite intriguing to me. So if we go all the way back to when they first crossed paths as teenagers, they were both looking to battle for a spot on the Olympic team for the 2004 Athens Olympics. And if you remember in the press conference, Amir Khan repeatedly, and even beforehand, repeatedly would speak about how those two sparred together and how he absolutely schooled Kell Brook in sparring, how it was easy, how the trainers told him to use one hand. And honestly, I actually believe him, because Khan at 17, we talk about him now not having a chin, not being that great, but was electric when he was younger. And so I can believe that. And Brook, as good as he is, he doesn't have any, he's not like stupidly athletic. He's not got amazing power or amazing speed. He's very, I don't want to say basic, because he kind of has that Ingle style of fighting where he's quite awkward, but how do I explain? He isn't somebody at a young age which I think would stand out to you, whereas Khan was. So that's why I can kind of believe it, to be honest with you. And when you're younger as a fighter, you need to have, I think, something that will almost put you ahead of everybody else. You look at someone like a Ryan Garcia, for example. The reason he got hyped up so young, and he's still young now, but even younger, is because of how fast his hands are. You look at someone like a young Mike Tyson, hyped up. Why? Because of how destructive he was. Some guys fighters just have something that stands out, and Khan had that in his hand speed. So we go through it. Obviously, Khan went to the Olympic Games, we all know, won silver, and he turned pro the year after that in 2005, whereas Brook turned pro in 2004. And again, sometimes box rec can't be that. They're pretty reliable box rec, to be fair, but sometimes you can never be too sure. But it is pretty sure. Obviously, Khan and Brook even made his debut against Peter Buckley in 2004. In the Don Valley Stadium in Sheffield, and Khan made his professional debut again a year after the Olympic Games in 2005 at the Bolton Arena against David Bailey. And at that point, Khan was hyped up all over. Like, you could see he had all these people, the media's come to speak to him. He got a hero's welcome after he came up, won silver at the Olympics. Everybody was talking about him. He had so much hype behind him. Frank Warren was talking about how great he would be. Everybody has so much faith. He also was, in a minority, an Asian boxer, so he had the support of the Asian community. It was all going for him. As the years went by, so they both slowly built their careers up. Khan obviously built it up all the way, but he kind of got thrown into these sort of tougher fights quite early, Khan. Whereas Brook sort of was slowly building his career up, and it was something that Khan mentioned to Brook about at a certain point, not now, about how he had never fought nobody, because he was sort of slowly building up. If you look at the names on his record from when he turned pro, no real standout names on it. I know he's only young, but from 2004 all the way to 2010, there was nobody there on his record at all that he really would scream about. And then you look at when they did, obviously, their careers sort of were parallel with each other, but with Khan, he obviously fought Prescott, lost, came back, beat Fagan. He then beat Marco Antonio Barrera. And again, was sort of being mentioned to fight these bigger names. He beat Paulie Malignaggi, beat Maidana, which for how poor Khan's chin is, and he has got a poor chin, I'm still lost how he survived against Maidana, to be honest with you, because Maidana was as tough a hit as I've ever seen. Then fought Zab Judah Khan. I mean, obviously fought McCloskey in between, but then he fought Zab Judah, then fought Lamont Peterson, then Danny Garcia. So there was a list of names that Khan fought where he was always kind of in these big fights. And because of who he is, he couldn't help but not to be in the big fight. All of his fights were big. Even now, his fights, if he fought in the UK, it'd be big. Amir Khan was always the A side in this fight, and that will, I think even Kell Brook himself said that didn't change. He is still the A side. Whereas you look at Brook, fought upwards, fought Carson Jones twice, fought Matthew Hatton, and at this point, like I said, they were both, Khan was the much bigger name, but Brook was slowly sort of in the background, and he was getting more and more notoriety, I think, from the British public and from boxing in general. And then you finally had the moment when they both met, or didn't meet, but people then got to see sort of the rivalry between Khan and Brook at that time on Ringside in 2012, the program that was on Sky Sports, which I wish they would bring back, to be honest. I really liked it. Could bring it back, maybe make it a YouTube series, but you could see then those two just didn't really like each other. Khan kind of talked down to Brook a little bit, talked about how Kell Brook isn't on his level, and how if he were to fight, he'd almost be going down a level Khan to fight him. And whereas Brook was talking about how if they fight, he'd knock him out, but again, he didn't have the names Brook on his record to go alongside it, so I think that's sort of why Khan really didn't take it as seriously. And in fairness, look at Khan's record at that time compared to Brook. In terms of him stepping down a level, he has maybe got a bit of a point. I mean, would you say Kell Brook is much better than Maidana in his prime? I know it's 140, but I don't know. I mean, Brook was very underrated, but I don't know if that's the case. Even same with Danny Garcia. Depends how highly you rate Kell Brook. I rated him highly, but not that highly, to the point where I think he's much better than some of the guys Khan fought. So maybe Khan does have a point, and I can't remember off the top of my head if this meeting was before or after he fought Danny Garcia. But obviously, at that time, Khan was talking about going up in weight to fight 147 pounds. Brook at that time was already an established welterweight. He was physically he's already kind of built into the weight. He's very big for that weight anyway, Kell Brook. And Khan, obviously, naturally a lighter guy. And they were quite civil with each other on that ringside, up until the point when Brook said that he doesn't think that Khan could handle the power and handle it at welterweight, and Khan didn't take it well. And I think Khan kind of got into Brook's head. Brook, no matter what anybody says, right, Khan really does annoy Kell Brook way more than Brook annoys Khan. Brook doesn't really annoy Khan that much, but man, Kell Brook, he's like, his head just goes every single time he talks about Amir Khan, and he just, I don't know, maybe, I don't think it's an envious thing, I don't think he's jealous, but I do think there is something there where Brook really, the fact that Amir Khan, I think, got picked to the Olympic Games instead of him, the fact that he got all this fame and Brook kind of had to do it slowly and more, he was kind of more under the radar, the fact that Khan didn't want to fight him at a point, I think annoys him still. So I think there's just so much that goes into it for Brook, and I think that's why he just can't stand him. But since they had the meeting, and obviously at that time, Khan was talking again before how he schooled Kell in sparring. Kell said that wasn't the case. Khan told him how he's not fought anybody. Brook saying he wouldn't just knock him out. Again, Khan verbally ain't great, but he really did get into Brook's head, I think, at that point, and really done him in that specific episode. But since then, 2012, we're talking here. Again, I can't remember if it was before or after Danny Garcia fight. I'm going to presume it's after. Khan then fought Carlos Molina in 2012. Then 2013, he fought Julio Diaz. That's the only fight he had that year. And then he went up in weight to 147, fought Collazo, fought Devin Alexander, fought Algieri, and really was slowly making a bit of a name for himself at welterweight. At the time, obviously, he'd gone with Virgil Hunter, who had made him a lot more defensively sound, even though he still got knocked out by Canelo. But we'd all get knocked out by Canelo, to be honest. But again, I think it was just old habits rather than anything to do with the training. And if you look at Brook since that, 2012, he then Brook fought in 2012 for Matthew Hatton, Carson Jones, Hector David Saldivia, Carson Jones in 2013, Senchenko in 2013, Alvaro Robles in 2014, and then he fought Sean Porter in 2014. At the time, the welterweight division was pretty hot at that point. You still had Ricky Hatton in the mix. They were talking about maybe having a trio of fights with Ricky, Amir, and Kell Brook. They were talking about, obviously Floyd was around, Manny Pacquiao was around, Tim Bradley. There was a lot of talk about. Amir even said to Kell Brook about the time when they were going back off that if you fight Tim Bradley, he'd fight the winner. And I think at the time Kell Brook actually turned down Bradley because he wanted to go the IBF route, and at the time the champion was Devin Alexander. Obviously he then lost to Sean Porter, which then Kell obviously beat to get the belt. So then we go on from that point, actually. We'll go from when Kell then won the belt. And that is when Kell Brook beat Sean Porter, that is when the fight should have happened. Because I think Amir was saying that, pretty sure he said once he gets the belt, then he would love the fight. He got the belt, but Amir, again, he was chasing the Mayweathers, the Pacquiaos. He wanted the big money fights. And that is when this narrative started to build, that Amir Khan was scared or frightened or ducking Kell Brook and running away from the fight. We all have opinions on this. I never thought he was actually afraid to fight Kell Brook as a fighter. He was trying to focus on the bigger fights. Like he said, the Mayweather, the Pacquiao. And I think he knew that this fight was never going anywhere. Whereas the Mayweather Pacquiao fights, they're not going to be there forever. So they're the big money fights. And like he says, he's a prize fighter. But if he had lost to Brook, and let's just say he took the fight against Brook, he really wouldn't have anywhere to go. It's almost like you don't really gain that much from at that point fighting him. So I think that's why he didn't really call for the fight that much. Whereas Kell Brook was desperate for that fight. And if you then look Kell Brook's career from that point, they both, again, their careers, like I said, they kind of run quite parallel with each other. Because Amir Khan fought Collazo, Alexander, Algieri, then went up in weight to fight Canelo. Did this because of the money, which I don't blame him for. And this is why I say I don't think he's afraid as a fighter, because I don't believe many people would really think Kell Brook is a scary fighter to face than Canelo Alvarez, irrespective of weight. And from that point then, Amir was kind of then, again, at the time, seen to be fighting Kell Brook. Again, Kell Brook didn't really have the name still. He then got knocked out by Canelo at the same time, which was 2016. In that same year, Brook fought Bizier. He then almost did the same thing by fighting Golovkin. Again, we remember what happened. Dominic Ingle had to throw the towel in because Brook's eye went. And at that point, they'd both been beaten by bigger men, but it wasn't a shameful thing. So the fight could have still happened then. The moment, in my opinion, when this fight completely lost its sort of spice and flavour was when Kell Brook lost to Errol Spence. Because I think from that moment on, when he lost the belt, Brook had nothing to negotiate with, and there was no real sort of, public sort of appeal to see this fight. It had almost gone past its sell-by date. And at the time, I remember Errol Spence was the mandatory for the IBF belt for Brook, and Khan was also another option that was out there for him. And I remember at that time there was talk about maybe he will fight Khan and vacate the belt, or he would go up and fight Spence and just leave Khan because of his mandatory. And I think the Spence fight was the dangerous fight for Brook. It was the one, it's why they hosted it at Bramall Lane, had all this stuff, because they knew how big a fight it was, and Spence kind of showed what he was. But Brook, after that, in the words of Tony Bow, he was kind of in the who needs us club, because who would have fought Kell Brook? There's nothing to gain from fighting him at that point. He lost the belt, he didn't have anything. And like I said, I think that's when the fight fizzled out. And then you look from 2017 onwards, then you look at Khan. Khan fought then, 2018 he fought Phil LaGreca. Now this was after he had all these issues with his wife, and I think, he was an I'm a Celebrity then, I think, actually, as well. I think he was I'm a Celeb on 2017, so it just shows that he was very much kind of losing himself. But after that, he went for Phil LaGreca in the Eco Arena in Liverpool and knocked him out. And when he knocked LaGreca out, Brook kind of got in the ring, and they were both kind of going back and forth with each other. And Amir Khan said then that he's chasing Kell Brook, and it kind of seemed like, okay, maybe the fight will happen then. Then fast forward to Brook. Brook fought Rebchenko and Michael Zarefa in 2018. That was when he was trying to make a bit of a campaign at light middleweight or super welterweight. Probably the worst campaign I've seen, because he didn't really do anything at that weight. But he was kind of fighting these guys who were warm-up fights for him. He then fought Mark DeLuca after that, and in 2020. And again, what can you say? It was another one of them fights where a warm-up. To me, a former world champion, I don't know if you really need that many warm-up fights, because they were all for what they all virtually were. And whilst Khan hasn't been active, he's been a bit more consistent with his ambitions, it feels like. He fought Canelo, he fought LaGreco, Vargas, and they were all... The LaGreco one was at 150, it says here, but still close to the welterweight limit. Vargas was at 147, and then he obviously fought Crawford. So it kind of felt like Khan knew what he wanted. Whereas Brook, he was talking about doing a thing at junior middleweight, but just never did anything. And then after the Luca fight that same year, he fought Terence Crawford. So there's never really been much consistency with Brook's career, to be honest. He's always kind of been close. He had the two big fights against Golovkin and Spence, but never... And he was competitive in those fights, but he just never really pushed on from that. And that was his last fight against Crawford. And Khan's last fight, he obviously fought Crawford too, but they both got stopped in a way. Brook obviously got stopped on standing on the feet, and Khan had that weird one where it was a low blow, but it wasn't really a low blow because he hit him on his leg, I think. And I'm not going to say he quit, but I wouldn't go against anybody who said that, to be honest, because it is one of them. And then Khan obviously fought in was it? I think it was in Saudi. He fought, and he fought Billy Dib. Again, just another one for the money for him. And now in 2022, they're finally scheduled to fight. So like I said, this fight has had a whole history behind it that goes back further. God, how far back does it go? Like, honestly, right, if you actually almost look at it, it almost goes to 20 years, the history between these two when it comes to these two competing and fighting with each other. We fought back in 2012, it could happen 2013, 14, 15, 16. It should have happened in them years. It didn't. Is it past its sell-by date? Probably, but we are still about to see it, and I am still quite looking forward to see how this goes, because ultimately, I don't think it would have been good info boxing if we never got to see these two fight. So yeah, Brook, February the 19th. That's sort of my whole recap on this whole history between Brook. So until next time.